I thought blocking his number would be the end of our story. It wasn't easy. Every sensible part of me kept telling me the same thing. He was 10 years younger than me. He deserved someone at the same stage of life. Someone without my baggage. So I convinced myself I was doing the right thing. I blocked his number. 1 week later, he found me. And that's when I realized our story was only just beginning. Monday mornings had a way of reminding me that life didn't care about my personal dramas. Emails, client meetings, fabric samples. A contractor who'd somehow managed to install marble in the wrong shade of white. I stared at the photographs on my computer screen. How? I muttered. Does someone accidentally order the wrong white? Olivia walked past carrying 2 folders. You've officially become an interior designer. What? You're arguing with colors. They're different. They're all white. They're absolutely not. She laughed. I'll never understand you people. My phone buzzed in my hand. A calendar reminder flashed across the screen. 10 a.m., new client presentation. Taking a deep breath, I gathered my tablet, smoothed down the trousers of my suit, and headed toward the main conference room. I needed this. I needed to focus on work and erase the memory of the young, dangerous man who had consumed my thoughts for the last 7 days. Halfway down the glass corridor, my boss, Daniel, stepped into my path, looking entirely too excited. There you are. Morning, Daniel, I said, offering a professional smile. Ready for the presentation? You'll be leading this one solo. I paused, frowning. I thought you were handling the pitch. I was. Daniel grinned, lowering his voice. Until the client specifically requested you. Personally. My heart gave a strange, uneasy thud. Me? Do I even know him? Daniel shrugged, turning to walk with me. Apparently. He was very insistent, Nessa. Said he wouldn't take the meeting with anyone else. That was odd. I didn't handle clients of that scale. I pushed open the heavy frosted glass door of the conference room. And froze. Standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the Atlanta skyline, was Kwang-su. He wore an immaculate charcoal suit that made his broad shoulders look devastatingly imposing. Hearing the door, he turned slowly. Our eyes met, and the air was instantly sucked from my lungs. He didn't look like a 29-year-old kid. He looked like an absolute monarch. A small, knowing smile touched his lips. Morning, Nessa. Every coherent thought, every bit of my hard-earned corporate professionalism, vanished into thin air. A fierce, sudden heat flooded my neck, my skin burning under his intense, unblinking gaze. Daniel looked between us, his eyebrows shooting up. Oh, you two have met. Neither of us answered. The silence in the room became heavy, suffocatingly thick. Daniel laughed awkwardly, sensing the strange, electric current vibrating between us. Well, I'll leave you to it then. He dropped the thick project folder onto the mahogany table and quickly backed out. The click of the door latch sounded like a trap snapping shut. Silence. Kwang-su didn't move from the window. He just watched me, his dark eyes tracing the frantic pulse point hammering in my throat. Then, in a smooth, quiet register, he asked, "Did you block my number?" My fingers tightened around my tablet. You did. It wasn't a question. There was no anger in his voice, just a chilling, absolute certainty. No, I lied, desperately trying to find my spine. One of his dark eyebrows lifted ever so slightly. Maybe. The faint smile returned, low and deeply attractive. So that's a yes. I looked anywhere except at him, my chest heaving slightly. It wasn't personal, Kwang-su. I know. That surprised me enough to snap my gaze back to his. You do? He nodded once, finally stepping away from the window. His movements were fluid, predatory, completely unhurried. It was my age. I blinked, completely caught off guard. How? You asked exactly one personal question at dinner, he said, closing the distance between us until he was standing right in front of me. The sheer physical presence of him made me feel suddenly small, entirely out of my depth. When a woman blocks a man a few hours after finding out he's 10 years younger, it's not difficult to work out why. He reached past me, his tailored sleeve brushing against my arm, sending a violent shiver down my spine as he pulled out a leather chair for me. I slowly sank into it, my legs feeling precariously weak. You make everything sound entirely too obvious. It usually is. He didn't sit across from me yet. He leaned over my chair, his face inches from mine, his deep voice dropping to a gravelly purr. A digital block is a very temporary solution, Nessa. Did you really think something that simple would keep me away from you? I swallowed hard, staring up at him. Kwang-su. You think I'm too young, he murmured, his gaze dropping to my lips before rising back to my eyes. You are, I breathed, trying to ignore the heavy heat pooling in my stomach. You're 29. And you're 39. Exactly. You don't understand the reality of that. No, he interrupted softly, finally pulling out the chair opposite me and sitting down. He folded his large hands on the table, completely relaxed. I understand perfectly. You care about the timeline. I don't. I frowned, trying to ground myself back in reality. I glanced down at the thick presentation folder Daniel had left behind. The bold letters at the top read, Client, Securint Global. My stomach dropped straight into my shoes. I looked up at him, horrified. You hired my firm. I did. You knew I'd be the account manager assigned to this tier. I requested you specifically, he corrected calmly. Securint just signed a multi-million-dollar retainer with your agency. I can request whomever I want. You can't just mix business with whatever this is, I stammered. You can't do that. I just did. A short, entirely disbelieving laugh escaped my throat. I couldn't help it. The sheer, unhinged audacity of this man was staggering. Kwang-su's eyes lit up instantly. There it is. Oh, don't start. The smile. You are completely impossible, I said, shaking my head, though the heat in my cheeks was deepening. I've been told. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table, locking his gaze onto mine like a laser. I'll ask you something, Nessa, and I want the truth. I braced myself, waiting. If I were 39, his voice dropped to a low, intimate vibration that felt like a physical touch. Would you have gone to dinner with me again? I opened my mouth to deny it, to tell him no, but the lie died completely in my throat. Because the honest, terrifying answer was yes. If he were older, I would have already fallen completely into his lap. He saw the answer written clearly across my face. A flash of dark triumph passed through his eyes. You don't have a problem with me, he said, his voice entirely steady. You have a problem with a number. The silence that followed was suffocating. I stared at his folded hands, trying to fight the magnetic pull he had over me. It isn't just a number, Kwang-su. It isn't that simple to the rest of the world. I've never been particularly interested in what the rest of the world thinks. Well, I have, I whispered, the confession coming out raw and vulnerable. My whole life. Kwang-su's icy, professional expression softened into something incredibly warm, almost tender. I know. No. I shook my head, my eyes burning slightly. You don't. Then tell me. Over dinner. He leaned back, his eyes holding mine prisoner. Have dinner with me tonight, Nessa. Kwang-su, I can't. No clubs, he interrupted softly, enumerating the terms with slow, deliberate intent. No surprises. No expectations. Just you and me. Talk to me. Tell me why I'm so wrong for you. I looked down at the multi-million-dollar folder, then back at the striking, brilliant young billionaire sitting across from me. Every sensible, logical part of my mature brain was screaming at me to run, to recuse myself from the account, to protect my still-healing heart. But my heart had stopped listening to my brain the moment his lips had touched my forehead a week ago. I closed my eyes, taking one ragged breath, then opened them. Okay. Kwang-su didn't gloat. He didn't smirk or offer a smug "I told you so." He simply nodded once, his expression shifting back into that impenetrable, rock-solid calm. 7 o'clock. I'll have my driver pick you up. He stood up, smoothing the front of his designer jacket, completely unbothered. Right on cue, a sharp knock rattled the door, and Daniel slid back into the room, holding a stack of charts. Ready to begin the walkthrough, Mr. So? Daniel asked eagerly. Kwang-su looked down at me one last time. In the blink of an eye, the intense, possessive man who had just cornered me vanished. In his place stood the lethal, untouchable CEO of Securint Global. His face was a mask of dead, corporate perfection. Shall we, Miss Price? He asked, his voice entirely formal. Cold enough to give me whiplash. It took me a full 3 seconds to remember how to breathe, let alone how to run a corporate meeting. Our second dinner somehow became a third. The third seamlessly melted into a fourth. Somewhere between the quiet intimacy of shared meals, late-night drives where the city lights blurred past the windows, and conversations that stretched into the early hours of the morning, I stopped noticing the number. 29. 39. It still mattered, of course. A heavy, lingering weight in the back of my mind. But it only existed in the cold light of day, after he dropped me off. The moment I was with him, the gap vanished entirely, swallowed up by the sheer, magnetic presence of the man. Nobody knew. Not Lisa, whose guest room I was still occupying. Not Olivia at the firm. That was the fierce, desperate deal I'd quietly struck with myself. As long as nobody knew, nobody could judge me. Nobody could point out how reckless I was being. Which meant, for just a little while, I could simply lose myself in him. You look happier. Like, suspiciously happier. Olivia's sharp voice abruptly shattered my thoughts. I jumped slightly, looking up from the fabric samples and mood boards scattered across my desk. What? You've smiled 3 times this morning, Nessa. Actual, genuine smiles. Not your customer service ones. I have not, I muttered, defensively rearranging a stack of swatches. You absolutely have. Olivia leaned against the edge of my desk, her eyes narrowing with playful suspicion. What's the secret? New skincare? A new facialist? A breathless laugh escaped me. No. New man. The laughter stopped instantly. My throat went completely dry. Olivia's jaw practically dropped. Oh my God, there is a man. It's not what you think, I stammered, feeling a sudden heat flooding my cheeks and blooming down my neck. It is exactly what I think. You were literally humming when you walked in today. I blinked, mortified. I was humming? You were. She grinned, entirely triumphant. Look at you, you're practically glowing. Who is he? I forced a shrug, looking back down at my work. I didn't even realize. It's nothing, Olivia. Seriously. That evening, the anticipation was a tight, electric knot in my stomach as I walked out of the office lobby. Kwang-su was already waiting by the curb. He wasn't leaning carelessly against his sleek black SUV, nor was he impatiently checking his watch. He was just standing there, hands shoved into the pockets of his tailored overcoat, quietly watching the chaotic city move around him. The moment his dark eyes found me through the crowd, his stoic expression melted. A slow, incredibly warm smile touched his lips, the kind of smile that felt like a private language meant only for me. You finished late, he noted as I reached him. I always do, I sighed, the exhaustion of the day catching up to me. You look completely spent. I frowned, looking up at his flawless, striking face. Do I really look that bad? You rubbed your eyes twice before you even crossed the street, he murmured, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register. Before I could protest, he reached out, his warm thumb gently brushing the tired skin just beneath my eye. The brief, casual contact sent a sudden, heavy wave of heat straight to my core. You notice entirely too much, I whispered. I've been told. He pulled his hand back, smoothly opening the passenger door for me. I climbed into the leather-scented warmth of the cabin, buckling my seatbelt as he slid in behind the wheel. So, where are you taking me tonight? Dinner. I let out a soft laugh. Again? Are you trying to fatten me up? Do you object? He asked, turning his head to look at me, a dangerous glint of amusement in his dark eyes. No, I admitted, a helpless smile tugging at my lips. I really don't. Good. That was all he said. Just that quiet, dominant good, like a man accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted. Some nights, he took me to blindingly expensive, exclusive restaurants where the waitstaff bowed and treated him like royalty. Other nights, we ended up in tiny, hole-in-the-wall, family-owned joints hidden down dark alleyways between massive corporate skyscrapers. Once, he pulled the heavy SUV over right beside a smoking, neon-lit food truck in a gravel lot. I stared out the window, then turned to him, utterly incredulous. You eat street food? He looked genuinely bewildered by the question. Why wouldn't I? I don't know. I gestured vaguely at him and the luxury vehicle. I expected. Caviar? White tablecloths. He looked out at the truck, then back at me, his expression deadpan. I wanted barbecue, Nessa. I burst out laughing so hard I nearly snorted, the sheer absurdity of the image shattering my remaining defenses. Kwang-su just watched me, a faint, deeply satisfied smile resting on his face, completely unapologetic. You planned this just to see my reaction, I accused. I wanted barbecue, he repeated smoothly. But your laugh is an excellent bonus. As the days bled into weeks, the layers of the mystery began to peel away. I learned the sharp, rigid corners of his personality. I learned that he despised tardiness. That he never wasted a single word. That when we walked down the sidewalk, his body instinctively shifted to the side closest to the roaring traffic, shielding me without a word. I noticed how strangers, rowdy groups, and even aggressive panhandlers instinctively stepped out of his path, sensing the quiet, lethal authority radiating off his broad frame. But I noticed the quiet things too. He never checked his phone when I was speaking. Not once. In a world full of distractions, when I opened my mouth, his undivided, heavy attention was locked entirely onto me. He listened to my rambling stories about design clients, everything. He listened as though there was absolutely nowhere else in the universe he would rather be. No man had ever made me feel so completely consumed. So deeply heard. One crisp evening, he walked me up to the entrance of Lisa's building, just as he always did. The city hummed around us, sirens in the distance, passing headlights illuminating the dark pavement. I stopped under the awning, turning to face him. You know? I started, wrapping my arms tightly around myself against the chill, looking up into his dark eyes. We've been doing this for a month now. We have. And you've never actually asked me to be your girlfriend. Kwang-su stared down at me, his face an unreadable mask in the shadows. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Then, his eyebrows lifted ever so slightly. I assumed you already were. I blinked, completely thrown off. What? You have dinner with me nearly every night, he said, stepping a fraction closer, his warmth cutting through the chilly air. You answer my calls. You let me drive you home. He paused, his gaze dropping to my mouth before rising back to lock onto mine. You smile like that when you see me. I didn't realize formal paperwork was required, Nessa. A loud, breathless laugh tore from my throat. The sheer, unyielding confidence of it was intoxicating. A genuine smile broke across his face. There it is. I really, desperately need to stop laughing around you, I said, rolling my eyes, though my heart was hammering violently against my ribs. No. His voice dropped to a low, quiet purr that vibrated straight through my skin. He reached out, his large, warm hand gently cupping the side of my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. The heat of his palm was dizzying. You really don't. For a long, suspended moment, neither of us moved. The rest of the world, the cars, the noise, the lingering ghost of my breakup, all dissolved into white noise. There was only the solid, heavy weight of his hand against my skin, and the terrifying realization washing over me. Standing right in front of me was the dangerous, hyper-focused younger man I had promised myself I would never, ever fall for. And somewhere along the way, I had fallen completely. A few days later, we were driving through Midtown after another long, quiet dinner. The heavy purr of the SUV's engine was the only sound anchoring us as the city lights blurred past the tinted windows. Kwang-su kept one hand lightly on the steering wheel, his profile sharp and elegant against the passing street lamps. You've never seen where I live. I looked up, tearing my gaze away from the passing skyline. No, I haven't. Would you like to? There was no hidden subtext in his voice. No predatory expectation. No smooth line meant to lure me in. It was just a direct, honest question. Yet, against every single sensible instinct I still possessed, the one screaming that entering his private sanctuary would seal my fate, I found myself nodding. I'd like that. A private elevator took us straight up, opening directly into his penthouse. When the doors slid open, I simply stood there, my breath catching in my throat. It wasn't because it was blindingly extravagant. In fact, it was the exact opposite. I had expected the home of a billionaire CEO to scream for attention. I'd braced myself for ostentatious marble, gold accents, and dripping crystal chandeliers. Instead, rich, dark oak floors stretched beneath my feet, absorbing the ambient light. Massive floor-to-ceiling windows framed a panoramic, breathtaking view of the glittering Atlanta skyline. A stunning black grand piano stood quietly in one corner, its surface gleaming. Bookshelves lined an entire wall, packed tightly from floor to ceiling. Everything was immaculate, minimalist, intentional. Nothing felt unnecessary or purely for show. It felt remarkably calm, a perfect fortress of solitude high above the chaos of the world. Kwang-su stood beside me, silently watching as I took it all in. "What?" he murmured. I smiled, looking up at him. "It suits you." "In what way?" I turned slowly, letting my eyes sweep over the vast, quiet space one last time. "It's peaceful. It's quiet." "So am I." "No?" I laughed softly, stepping further into the room. "You're silent, Kwang-su. There is a distinct difference." One corner of his mouth lifted in a rare, handsome half-smile. "I suppose there is." He shed his heavy overcoat, tossing it casually onto a chair before heading toward the kitchen. "Tea, coffee, or something stronger?" "Coffee is fine," I called out. While he was gone, curiosity pulled me deeper into the apartment. Every room carried that exact same weight of absolute order and control. Nothing was out of place. No clutter, no loose papers. Then, I noticed a heavy door standing slightly ajar at the end of a long hallway. I pushed it open gently, stepping inside. The floor instantly changed under my feet to traditional woven tatami mats. A massive, heavy leather punching bag hung securely from a steel beam on one side of the room. Rows of wooden training weapons rested neatly against the wall, their surfaces smooth from use. On the far wall, a pristine glass cabinet housed a row of heavy medals. I stepped closer, lifting one of the heavy gold medals between my fingers. National Championship. Gold. I looked at the next one. International Invitational. Gold. And another. All gold. "So?" His deep voice sounded right behind me, low and resonant in the quiet room. "You found it." I turned around, still holding the cold medal between my fingers. "You mentioned at dinner once that you used to do judo." "I did." I gestured toward the wall of gold. "Kwang-su, this isn't just doing judo." A faint, amused smile touched his lips. "I was competitive." A disbelieving laugh escaped me. "I think that is the understatement of the century." He leaned his broad shoulder against the doorframe, his dark eyes tracking my movements. "I enjoyed winning. I still do. I can tell." My eyes wandered across the room again. The tatami mats were worn smooth from years of brutal, disciplined training. Nothing in this room was decorative. Everything had been used. Everything had been earned with sweat and blood. "Do you still train?" "Every morning at 5. "Of course you do," I sighed, shaking my head. He tilted his head, a glimmer of genuine amusement in his eyes. "You sound disappointed, Nessa." "I'm exhausted just thinking about it." For the first time since I'd known him, Kwang-su actually laughed out loud. It wasn't a booming sound, just a rich, deep chuckle that seemed to surprise both of us, melting the last bit of tension in the air. "You should hear yourself," he murmured. "I probably shouldn't." My voice dropped to a whisper. "You don't talk about yourself very much, do you?" "No." "Why?" Kwang-su stepped directly into my personal space, his towering frame casting a shadow over me. His dark eyes locked onto mine, burning with a quiet intensity. "Because I'd much rather listen to you." For reasons I couldn't fully explain, that simple answer hit me like a physical blow. My chest tightened. My ex, Donald, had spent years talking at me about his grand ambitions, his career, his future, his needs. I had been an accessory to his life. But standing in front of me now was a man who looked at me as if I were the only thing that mattered in the room, who listened to my every breath. We moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows, standing side by side as Atlanta glittered like a sea of diamonds below us. Thousands of lights. Thousands of lives. But inside this penthouse, the air felt thick, isolated, and incredibly hot. "So," I murmured, trying to clear the sudden tightness in my throat. "How many women have you brought up here, Kwang-su?" He didn't blink. He turned his head, his heavy gaze dropping over my face. "You're the first." I let out a soft, nervous laugh. "I don't believe that for a single second." "A man like you?" "You asked," he said, his voice smooth and deadpan. I answered. I searched his face for any sign of a joke, a smirk, a playful tease. There was none. His expression was absolute, unyielding truth. You really mean that? I breathed, my heart doing a sudden, violent thud against my ribs. I looked away, suddenly breathless, completely unsure of what to do with the weight of that information. You make me incredibly nervous. I know. You always know. I pay attention to everything you do, Nessa. A heavy, electric silence settled between us. It wasn't uncomfortable, it was dizzying. He didn't try to force himself closer. He didn't reach for my waist or use his size to intimidate me. He just stood there, giving me the space, giving me the absolute power to choose. My heart hammered frantically against my ribs. Slowly, deliberately, I took a step toward him. He stayed entirely still, his breath even. One more step. Close enough to feel the warmth of him. Close enough to meet his eyes. You're waiting for me. Yes. Why? Because this has always been your decision. The words stole the last of my doubts. I reached for him first. My fingers curled around the front of his shirt. Then, I kissed him. The world disappeared. There was no Atlanta skyline. No age difference. No Donald. No heartbreak. Just us. His hand settled gently against my waist. Careful. As though he was still giving me the chance to change my mind. I didn't. I deepened the kiss instead. His forehead rested against mine when we finally broke apart. Are you sure? There it was again. Not assumption. Not expectation. A question. I answered the only way I could. I kissed him again. Then I felt him lift me effortlessly into his arms. Later, wrapped safely in his arms, I lay listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath my cheek. Everything about the night had been different. Not hurried. Not selfish. Not about proving anything. It had felt like coming home to a place I'd never been before. For the first time in years, I hadn't felt lonely, abandoned, or like I was trying to hold together pieces of someone Donald had broken. I simply felt loved. Morning sunlight spilled across the bedroom. I woke before he did. For a long time, I simply watched him sleeping. The intimidating man who could silence an entire nightclub looked peaceful, human. I smiled. Then, without thinking, I remembered the number. 29. 39. For weeks, it had echoed through my mind. A warning. A reason to walk away. This morning, it felt strangely small. Not because the years had disappeared. Because they no longer mattered more than a man beside me. Donald no longer lived inside my thoughts. His shadow no longer followed me into every room. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't surviving. I was living. Keeping secrets, I quickly learned, turned out to be far harder than falling in love. By the third week of quietly seeing Kwang-su, my carefully constructed walls were crumbling for me inside out. I was smiling at nothing while staring at my computer screen. I was checking my phone every 5 minutes, my pulse jumping whenever his name flashed across the glass. I was suddenly leaving the office at 5 o'clock sharp, something I hadn't done in 5 years. Lisa noticed. Olivia noticed. Even Daniel raised a subtle eyebrow when I politely declined to lead a late-night client dinner. Something fundamental in me had shifted. Everyone around me could feel the seismic change, but nobody knew the cause. My phone vibrated against my desk. Lisa, lunch. Saturday. No excuses. A helpless smile touched my lips. Bossy as always. Before I could even type a reply, her follow-up text popped up. Lisa, correct. Noon. See you there. Biddy was already sitting at our usual corner booth, sipping sparkling water, when Lisa and I walked into the sunlit bistro. The second Biddy spotted me, her eyes widened. She stood up immediately and pulled me into a tight, warm hug. As she pulled back, she kept her hands firmly on my shoulders, scanning my face with sharp, loving scrutiny. Look at you, Biddy breathed. I blinked, shifting slightly under her gaze. What? A huge grin broke across her face. Nessa, you're practically glowing. I rolled my eyes, feeling a sudden, warm flush creeping up my neck. I'm not glowing. It's just humid outside. Lisa pointed a manicured finger directly at me, turning to Biddy. See? What did I tell you? I don't know what either of you are talking about. I lied, sliding into the leather booth. You absolutely do, Lisa countered, taking her seat opposite me. I let out a breathless, helpless laugh, and Lisa pointed at me again with total triumph. There. Right there. What? That. What? The laughing, Biddy said softly, a deeply tender expression softening her features. I've missed hearing that sound, Ness. We both have. For a moment, a heavy, loving silence settled over the table. Then, Lisa folded her arms across her chest, leaning forward like an interrogator beneath a bright light. So, spill. How long? I already knew that tone. There was no escaping it. How long what? Lisa gave me a dry, unblinking look. How long have you been seeing Kwang-su? A fierce heat flooded my cheeks. I groaned, leaning my forehead against my hand. A few weeks. Lisa stared at me, her jaw dropping slightly before she leaned back, clapping her hands once. I knew it. I knew there was someone driving you crazy. You did? Nessa, we lived together, Lisa said, throwing her hands up. You started coming home with this soft, ridiculous smile on your face. You were humming while making coffee. You ironed a silk blouse, on a Tuesday night. Biddy burst out laughing, covering her mouth. Lisa. I just didn't realize it was him, Lisa continued, her eyes wide with shock and amusement. You've been sneaking around with a billionaire. I sighed, tracing the condensation on my glass. I wasn't sneaking around. I searched for a word that didn't sound pathetic. Keeping it to myself. That's literally the definition of keeping secrets, Lisa pointed out. Biddy smiled, reaching over to pat Lisa's hand. I'll allow it. A man like that deserves a little privacy. Lisa shook her head dramatically. I still cannot believe you've been quietly dating a gorgeous, 6'3" Korean billionaire without giving us a full briefing. I wasn't planning on dating him, I admitted quietly. And yet, Lisa gestured wildly toward me. Here we are. A small, unstoppable smile curved my lips. Biddy caught it instantly, her playful expression settling into something much deeper, much more gentle. You really fell for him, didn't you? Biddy asked quietly. The smile slowly faded, replaced by the raw, overwhelming truth of it. I looked up, meeting her eyes. I really did. The playful atmosphere at the table softened, yielding to a quiet intimacy. Lisa noticed the subtle shift in my posture first. Nessa, what's wrong? Why do you look so worried? I stared down at my water glass, my fingers tightening around the cold stem. There's something I haven't told either of you about him. Both of them waited, their full, undivided attention locked onto me. I took a slow, deep breath, bracing myself for the inevitable judgment. He's 29. Absolute silence. Biddy blinked once, processing the math. Lisa frowned slightly, tilting her head. And? I looked up at Lisa, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm 39, Lisa. This time, the silence lingered heavy and thick over the white tablecloth. Finally, Lisa slowly leaned back into her seat, letting out a low whistle. 10 years. I nodded, feeling small. That's why I kept him hidden. That's why I tried to block his number in the beginning. I knew what people would say. I knew what the world would think of a 39-year-old woman clinging to a younger man. Biddy frowned, her tone fiercely protective. Who cares what people say, Ness? I do, I confessed, my voice trembling slightly. I've spent my entire life caring about doing the right thing, keeping up appearances, being the responsible one. Lisa looked thoughtful, studying me with a mixture of sympathy and awe. I'll admit, I didn't expect a 10-year gap. But, she tilted her head, her eyes narrowing curiously. Does it bother him? A soft, genuine warmth spread through my chest as I pictured Kwang-su's dark, unblinking eyes. Not even a little bit. Does he know? He knew before I even had the courage to say it out loud. I laughed softly, remembering that high-tension morning in the boardroom. I asked his age once at dinner, and the moment I blocked his number, he worked out the exact math. He literally bought out a retainer with my agency, just to corner me in a meeting. Lisa let out a crack of laughter. Okay, that is ridiculously hot. Well, that's certainly one way to get your attention. That sounds exactly like him. It does, I agreed. Biddy reached across the table, her warm hand gently squeezing mine. Nessa. She waited until I looked her in the eye. When was the last time somebody made you this happy? When was the last time you felt this cherished? I opened my mouth to offer a polite answer, but my throat locked up. Nothing came out. Because the honest, terrifying answer was never. Donald had never made me feel like this. Biddy smiled gently, squeezing my fingers tighter. Donald took pieces of you, Ness. He spent 10 years slowly chipping away at your confidence until you felt like you were nothing without him. A thick, painful lump formed in my throat, my eyes burning. Kwang-su didn't fix you, Biddy continued softly, her voice filled with profound certainty. He simply reminded you who you were before Donald broke you. Tears welled at the corners of my eyes. Neither Lisa nor I spoke, because Biddy had articulated the exact truth I had been too terrified to acknowledge. Lisa reached across the small table, squeezing my other hand, her eyes shining slightly. You know what? What? I asked, wiping away a stray tear with the back of my wrist. I still think a 10-year age gap is going to be messy, Lisa said honestly. I think the world is going to be annoying about it. So do I whispered. But, Lisa smiled, her expression radiant and fierce. I've watched you come back to life over the last month, Nessa. I've watched you remember your worth. So if that young, terrifying billionaire is the one doing that for you, I am 100% on his side. A breathless laugh tore from my chest. Lisa pointed at me triumphantly. There it is again. That laugh. Biddy beamed. I really, truly love this version of you, Ness. She reached down into her designer handbag, pulling out a heavy, luxurious envelope. Oh, before I forget, this is actually why I begged for lunch today. She slid the elegant, cream-colored envelope across the marble table toward me. I frowned, wiping my eyes as I looked down at the embossed gold foil. What's this? My official engagement party invitation, Biddy announced, her face lighting up with excitement. I was waiting until the venue was officially locked in before giving it to you guys. My heart soared. Biddy. Oh my gosh, congratulations. Thank you, she giggled, leaning back. I picked up the heavy cardstock, admiring the delicate calligraphy. But then, almost as an afterthought, Biddy's smile faltered just a fraction. Oh. Biddy swallowed hard, her voice dropping an octave. I should probably warn you about the guest list, Ness. I looked up from the invitation, sensing the sudden, sharp shift in the air. What do you mean? Biddy looked at me with deep hesitation. Donald and Cherry have already RSVP'd. Everything inside my chest completely froze. He's in Eric's wedding party, Biddy said with an apologetic sigh. You know they've been friends since college. Eric insisted on inviting him, and I couldn't really say no without starting a massive fight before we even get down the aisle. Biddy immediately reached back across the table, her face flooded with panic. Nessa, listen to me. You do not have to come. I will completely understand if you want to skip it. I won't be mad at all. I looked down at the gold foil invitation resting in my hands. Then, I looked back up at my dear friend, taking a slow, steady breath. This day wasn't about Donald. It wasn't about Cherry. It was about Biddy's happiness. A calm, genuine smile touched my lips. I wouldn't miss your engagement party for anything in the world. The ballroom glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Soft music drifted through the room. Champagne glasses clinked. Laughter echoed between beautifully dressed guests. Biddy looked radiant. I hugged her tightly. You look beautiful. She smiled. So do you. I laughed. I've had help. Her eyes drifted past my shoulder. Kwang-su. I nodded. He cleans up well. She grinned. I noticed. I turned. He was speaking quietly with Eric near the bar. Dark suit. White shirt. No tie. Effortlessly elegant. Even from across the room. People noticed him. Not because he was trying to be noticed. Because he couldn't help it. So? I already recognized that tone. What? We're stealing you. Lisa laughed. I told you this was coming. I've been waiting 3 weeks. Trisha grinned. And now I finally get to interrogate you. It's not an interrogation. Oh. She smiled mischievously. It absolutely is. Biddy laughed. Come on. I want to hear everything. Before I could protest, the three of them were already steering me towards the ladies' room. I looked back over my shoulder. He'd already closed the distance between us. I'm abandoning you. I'll survive. I smiled, then held out my purse. Can you hold this? Without hesitation, he took it. Of course. Trisha stopped walking for a second. She looked from him to me, then back again. See? She nudged Lisa. I told you. Lisa laughed. What? He's completely gone for her. Heat rushed to my cheeks. Oh, stop. I've only known him for 30 seconds. Trisha said. And even I can see it. The ladies burst into laughter as they disappeared through the restroom door. I waited. Nessa's small, designer evening purse rested comfortably, almost absurdly, in my palm. I stood quietly near the perimeter of the ballroom, melting effortlessly into the shadows. It was a familiar position. Comfortable. Natural. It allowed me to scan the room without drawing eyes, tracking every exit, every potential threat. Mr. So? I turned my head slightly. A young woman dressed in an overly expensive, desperate to be noticed gown smiled brightly as she stepped out of the crowd. Beside her stood a slightly older man, adjusting his tuxedo jacket with an air of self-importance. I'm so sorry to interrupt, she said, her voice dripping with practiced charm. You probably don't remember me. I searched my memory, scanning her facial structure. Nothing. No. We met at the Bright Spark Children's Foundation Gala last year, she explained, her smile faltering just a fraction at my bluntness. You donated $1 million. I remembered the event. A tax write-off my accountants had insisted on. I didn't remember her. She laughed softly, a nervous, fluttering sound. I suppose you meet a lot of people. I do. I'm Cherry, she said, extending a manicured hand. I didn't take it, keeping my arms relaxed. She smoothly dropped her hand, gesturing to the man beside her. I remember thinking last year that you were far too young to be standing in a room full of old executives twice your age. My fiancé. She corrected herself with a smug, deliberate beam. My partner. Donald. Donald gave me a stiff, polite nod, trying to match my posture. I acknowledged him with a cold, microscopic tilt of my chin. Cherry practically radiated pride, leaning into Donald's side. Donald, this is So Kwang-su, the CEO of Securint Global. I still remember everyone talking about your donation, Mr. So. $1 million. And then you vanished before the board could even thank you. People talked about your exit for the rest of the night. I inclined my head, my voice flat. There were more pressing matters requiring my attention. I suppose a man like you always has those, Cherry purred. Then, her eyes drifted downward, landing on the delicate leather strap looped over my fingers. Oh, that isn't yours, is it? I glanced down at the purse. No. A cold beat of silence hung in the air. It's my girlfriend's. Something sharp shifted in Cherry's eyes. A flash of profound disappointment, a split-second calculation of missed opportunity, before she quickly masked it with a tight smile. Donald, meanwhile, narrowed his eyes, silently evaluating me, trying to gauge my net worth against his own. Suddenly, Cherry looked past my shoulder, and the fake smile completely drained from her face. Oh. Her voice dropped to a panicked whisper. Donald turned his head. What is it? She stared toward the far side of the room, her chest heaving slightly. She's here. Donald followed her gaze, and I watched his entire jaw go rigid. Cherry swallowed hard, leaning closer to Donald, completely forgetting I was standing there. Your ex. Nessa. Donald stiffened, his shoulders squaring defensively. My eyes tracked his reaction, then slowly moved past him. Nessa was already making her way across the marble floor toward us. Cherry kept her voice low, hissed and venomous. Just ignore her, Donald. Don't look at her. Donald frowned, a flare of ugly arrogance crossing his features. What? Why? Cherry gripped his arm tightly. She still finds this difficult. Seeing us together, seeing how happy we are, she might get emotional. She might cause a scene. Just let it go, okay? Let's just walk away. Donald. My gaze snapped back to the man standing in front of me. The temperature in my blood dropped to absolute zero. So, this was him. This mediocre, posturing man was the creature who had walked away from her. This was the man whose pathetic, selfish absence had left scars deep enough to make Nessa doubt her own worth. The man who had broken her to pieces and left her to bleed. I looked at his expensive suit, his weak chin, his arrogant, fragile posture. A pathetic excuse for a man. I looked away, dismissing his existence entirely. My eyes found Nessa again, and the ice in my chest instantly melted. The chatter of the ballroom faded into a dull hum the moment I stepped back onto the main floor. I started making my way across the crowded room, smoothing down the fabric of my dress. Halfway there, my feet nearly froze. I saw them. Donald. Cherry. They were standing right there, deeply entrenched in a conversation with Kwang-su. For months, I had tortured myself imagining this exact moment. I had laid awake at night wondering what would happen to my heart if I ever saw them out in public together. I had braced myself for the blinding anger, the suffocating humiliation, the agonizing ache that had been carved into my chest. I waited for that familiar, crushing tightness to wrap around my ribs. I waited, and nothing happened. There was no pain, no panic, no phantom heartbreak. I simply looked at them, two completely ordinary, insignificant people, and kept walking. The exact second Kwang-su's dark eyes locked onto me, the terrifying, unyielding aura he usually carried completely dissolved. His sharp features softened into something deeply tender, a small, private smile appearing on his lips. A smile meant exclusively for me. I reached his side, and he immediately extended his hand, presenting my purse. "Thank you," I smiled, taking it. Then, without a shred of hesitation, Kwang-su slid his heavy, powerful arm around my waist. His hand gripped my hip possessively, pulling my body firmly against his broad side, anchoring me to him in front of the entire room. He looked down at me, his eyes dark and intense. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," I whispered, my heart fluttering for an entirely different reason now. Kwang-su slowly turned his gaze back to the couple standing frozen in front of us. His face returned to a mask of polite, absolute dominance. "Have you met my girlfriend?" he asked calmly. Cherry stared at me, her mouth dropping open, so wide I thought her jaw might unhinge. Every trace of smug satisfaction vanished, replaced by stunned disbelief. Donald looked even worse. His expression froze, his eyes darting from Kwang-su's heavy arm wrapped tightly around my waist, to my dress, then finally to Kwang-su's face, realizing in one devastating second exactly who I was with. For a heavy, agonizing heartbeat, nobody breathed. The silence was absolute. I looked at Donald. Then at Cherry. A lifetime of agonizing hurt, tears, and betrayal, suddenly reduced to two small, pathetic, trembling faces. "We're acquainted," I said smoothly, my voice steady and entirely devoid of emotion. Donald gave a rigid, jerky nod, his Adam's apple bobbing violently as he forced out my name. "Nessa." "Donald," I replied. I shifted my gaze to his partner. "Cherry." Cherry forced a horrific, trembling smile, her voice cracking. It's nice to see you, Nessa." "You too." A suffocating, brutal silence settled over the group. It was comfortable, empowering, and light for me. It was visibly agonizing for them. They looked like they wanted the marble floor to open up and swallow them whole. Kwang-su didn't give them another second of his time. He looked down at me, his thumb tracing a slow, soothing circle against my hip through the fabric of my dress. "Ready?" I nodded, looking up into his beautiful, dangerous eyes. "Yes." Without uttering another word to the ghosts of my past, Kwang-su's hand shifted gently to the small of my back, guiding me forward. Together, we walked away, cutting through the party crowd. I didn't look back. I didn't feel the slightest urge to. For the first time in a very, very long time, the shadow of my past wasn't chasing me down. I hadn't just survived them. With Kwang-su beside me, I had finally left them in the dust. The drive back to the penthouse was quiet. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of an argument, or the anxious quiet of two people searching for something to say. It was comfortable, weightless. Neither of us felt the desperate need to fill the space between us with unnecessary words. Atlanta slipped past outside the passenger window in a blur of gold and neon. Streetlights, glowing skyscrapers, late-night traffic, the familiar, pulsing rhythm of a city slowly settling into the deep hours of the night. Kwang-su rested one large, relaxed hand at the top of the steering wheel, his eyes fixed calmly on the highway ahead. His other hand lay loose and open beside the gear selector, just inches from mine. For several long, tranquil minutes, neither of us spoke. Then, without turning his head, "You okay?" I shifted in the soft leather seat to look at him. His profile was carved out of shadow and gold streetlight, his sharp jaw relaxed. There wasn't a trace of insecurity in his deep voice. No fishing for reassurance, No subtle probe to see if I was still thinking about the man from the ballroom. No need to measure himself against the past. Just quiet, unconditional concern for how I felt in this exact moment. A warm, blooming sensation opened up in my chest. I smiled. I am. He glanced over at me briefly, dark eyes softening as they swept over my face, taking in the truth of my words. Then his gaze returned to the road. Good. That was all. No endless questions. No tedious, clinical analysis of what had just happened. No desire to dissect Donald's stunned expression or Cherry's public humiliation. Kwang-su understood something fundamental. Something I was only just beginning to fully realize myself as the city lights washed over us. Donald hadn't crossed my mind a single time since we stepped out of those ballroom doors. Not once. I looked back out the window, watching the reflections trace across the glass. I thought about the woman I'd been just a few short months ago. The broken version of myself who'd spent endless, solitary nights crying until her chest burned. The woman who had ripped herself apart questioning her own worth, obsessing over why a decade of devotion and sacrifice hadn't been enough to keep him from walking away. Tonight, I had stood directly in front of the source of all that devastation. I had looked Donald dead in the eye, holding the arm of a man who dwarfed him in every imaginable metric. And I had felt nothing. No residual anger. No simmering bitterness. No ache of betrayal. No secret, lingering longing. Just absolute, unshakable peace. I hadn't dragged his ghost out of that ballroom with me. I hadn't carried his baggage into Kwang-su's passenger seat. I had left Donald right where he belonged, fading into the noise, buried in the past. I reached across the sleek center console. My fingers slid gently, deliberately between Kwang-su's. He glanced down at our joined hands, a small, rare smile touching the corners of his lips. Without missing a beat, his strong fingers laced tightly through mine, his warm grip closing over my hand, heavy and protective. Neither of us said a word. We didn't need to. The quiet carried everything we were building. For the first time in months, I wasn't looking in the rearview mirror wondering what I'd lost, or why I hadn't been enough. I was looking straight ahead, falling effortlessly into everything I was about to find.